The New Saint. An Introduction. I am a new saint. I am also a queen. However, that may be subject matter for another book. Traditionally, people do not ordain themselves saints unless they are leaders of a cult. Whether or not someone is a saint or cult leader is up to others to discern. In the case of a saint, a spiritual community recognizes the divine qualities of a person and their extraordinary activities, usually after their death. Cult members are not so good at recognizing that they are in a cult or that they have a cult leader. Those labels are applied by others outside of the cult, who are actually members of larger cults that have become mainstreamed and normalized, like academic institutions, pop star fan stan communities, political parties, royal families, or our favorite online retailers whose products magically appear on our doorstep when we press a button on an app. This is not a book about cults. Yet. I am not a new saint because I feel divine or extraordinary. I am a new saint because I have chosen to give a shit about myself and everyone around me, and because I have figured out much of the work I need to do to help people experience the freedom to be their most authentic selves. I do that work, and I keep showing up to do that work. This may sound extraordinary, but I don't want it to be because I need you to join me on this path. We no longer have a choice. I want you to become a new saint so that we can together make this work ordinary and accessible. Just as many of us are trained to do simple tasks to function in our lives, I want us to train to free each other from suffering while we train to reduce our own suffering. This audiobook is about how to do that. But first, I should explain where the notion of new saints came from. The apocalypse. Let's start with something fun and light, like the apocalypse. To begin with, we are not experiencing the end of the world, but we are experiencing the end of some provocative and desperately enduring lies we have told ourselves. With the end of lies comes the awakening of truth. And so we are living in a period when we are confronting truth. Truth about ourselves and our relationship to death and dying, to systems and institutions of violence, to transhistorical trauma, to the health of our planet, to capitalism, and ultimately to the fact that we can no longer continue living like we have in the past. Real truth is unrelenting. Like the sun piercing the clouds on an overcast day, it doesn't go away just because we can't handle it. Truth uncovers everything. All the shit that we have spent our lives running away from. And when something is uncovered, even if it's the most intense individual or collective trauma, it demands to be taken care of. Although the apocalypse can be defined as unveiling and truth-telling, it is perhaps experienced by many of us as an invasive anxiety, worry, fear, or even terror. This anxiety can be so intense that we don't even experience it as anxiety, either because we have become disassociated, our nervous system has shut down our capacity to feel because the sensation is too intense for us to process, or because the energy of the anxiety is manifesting as another sensation, like physical pain, fatigue, anger, or sadness. For me, living through the apocalypse feels like trying to stand on ground that is constantly shifting, making plans for tomorrow while having little faith that there will be a tomorrow. It is the feeling of the bottom falling out from under me. It is struggling to deal with the great Buddhist law of impermanence, which teaches that everything is always changing and in flux. Impermanence is sometimes excruciating if you, like me, are addicted to stability. The apocalypse has been happening for a long time, and it started well before the death of Prince and Betty White, the emergence of the coronavirus and its subsequent quarantine, the election of Donald Trump, the January 6th insurrection, Brexit, 9/11, the Newtown and Columbine shootings, the AIDS epidemic, the destruction of the Greenwood community, or the Holocaust and World War II. Maybe it started when Portuguese sailors reached the coast of Ghana, or when Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean, and my ancestors were later enslaved, or with the genocide and relocation of indigenous peoples all over the world, or further back than that, with the Spanish Inquisition or the Crusades. Maybe the apocalypse started with the evolution of race into hierarchies of power, with whiteness as the expression of a moral attitude that came to violently repress all other racial groups. Or perhaps the apocalypse began with the transition into modernity, from the agricultural age to the Industrial Revolution, or even with the violent patrilineal overthrow of matrilineal cultures in the Indus Valley civilizations. Perhaps it started in the Garden of Eden when the forbidden fruit was eaten. My own practices and beliefs suggest that it may have begun when we forgot we were expressions of the divine and started identifying with the pain of separateness and began feeling overwhelmed by the delusion. Regardless of when the apocalypse started, we are knee-deep in it now. And it may be strange to hear this, but I believe the apocalypse is a blessing. There's nothing like a crisis to wake us up and force us to start getting serious about change. A new age and new saints. That the days are becoming indistinguishable from each other is a sign of eternity. The new world isn't that of waiting for the old order to reopen or the old economy to restart. It's to realize that the messianic age begins when we see that the essential labor is to love and feed each other and to revel in the feeling of endless resurrection when we wake up and have nothing to do that we don't have to do unless we choose it and choose it in love. Carrie C. Line. I have often noticed that those who are loudest about how we are doomed are those who have never had to struggle in collective survival. I am not glorifying descending from communities that have had to survive systems created to annihilate us, because the transhistorical trauma has been heavy. When you or your community have not known the struggle, chances are you will not know or embody resilience. You will not understand how important and powerful collective cooperation and care can be. Those of us who are descendants of people who have survived slavery, genocide, wars, plagues, or any expression of warfare carry the seeds of survival in our DNA. We harbor ancestral memories of what it has meant for our people to make a way out of no way. My ancestry has taught me to look deeply into this period and understand that there is potential for not just surviving, but flourishing. In one of his most famous poems, The Second Coming, W.B. Yeats wrote, "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." To meet the apocalypse, you must embody an intention that this experience will not consume you, that this experience is calling you into a deeper labor of transformation and creativity. There are so many people full of passion and intensity, but this passion is actually intense reactivity to the fear of being consumed, as well as to the helplessness we feel confronting something that cannot be organized or bypassed. Carrie Seline, a Jewish mystic, scholar, and practitioner of the Lama, an esoteric religious tradition founded by Aleister Crowley, was the first person who offered me a beautiful and generative vision of what the ongoing apocalypse was opening into. As is often the case with people who become my teachers, I never knew of Carrie Seline until very shortly after her passing in 2020, when a close mutual friend sent me some of her work. I was moved by how she spoke of the days blending into one another and about reveling in eternity, which is a revelation expressed first in my life by our great pop philosopher Lauryn Hill when she said that everything was everything to my generation. Carrie speaks of the need not to return to our old ways, but to expand bravely into the age that is coming, the Messianic age, or the Golden Age, when we will experience universal peace. I understand peace as the embodiment of the abolitionist dream of a world grounded in personal freedom, collective care, conflicts held in love, and communities where we live in the truth of things held in compassion, as opposed to an avoidance of the violence of our past and present. Listening to Carrie, I was reminded of the great Indian guru Neem Karoli Baba, or Maharaji, who, during the height of his teaching life in the mid-1900s, taught, "Love everyone, serve everyone, remember God, and tell the truth." The Messianic age will be as Carrie envisioned, a time when we must love everyone. This is the essential labor that Maharaji taught us as well, to just love and to be loved, to feed and allow ourselves to be fed, to do what is only done out of love, and to embrace the imperative labor of resting, as taught by my sister and comrade, Tricia Hersey, the founder and bishop of the NAP ministry. This is what the rebalancing work of the apocalypse is propelling us toward. A life where the concept of labor is not linked to capitalist production and consumption, but to the essential well-being of our hearts, minds, and bodies, where we will know how to choose love over resentment, rest over exhaustion, silence over noise, and stillness over busyness. The present apocalypse is one thing that has awakened this new path of sainthood for me. The other was getting sick and tired of performative goodness. Faking it. I have only seen a few seconds of the video of George Floyd being slowly murdered, but it was enough to remind me again that America does not love Black people. The murder of George Floyd ignited a renewed movement for Black lives that saw mass marches and actions not just in the country, but around the world. Not only were many of us on the streets, but we were also re-educating ourselves. The quarantine went from an opportunity to explore baking bread and making cakes to learning Marxist theory and becoming abolitionist scholars wanting to defund the police. On social media, white people were falling over themselves to promote and throw money at Black activists, healers, and scholars, while posting their hot takes and Black Lives Matter memes and calling other white people out. I lost count of how many "you need to follow this Black person now" lists I was on. On Instagram, I shot up to 40,000 followers from barely 6,000, which was weird for someone like me, who has a strong dislike of social media outside of sharing humorous memes and staying connected to friends and family. After Floyd's murder, my book, Love and Rage, which explored anger and its vital role in healing and justice work, was published. It became popular due to its timeliness, and I found myself featured in major publications like The Washington Post educating folks on the need for engaged, compassionate social action that embraces the power of anger while acknowledging our broken hearts. But something was bothering me. So much of the activity on social media felt performative. It felt like white people were trying to look good, and in doing so, were desperate to feel good about their unwillingness to do the serious labor of disrupting white supremacy. None of these performative acts, such as posting black squares on Instagram, has done anything to stop systematic disposal of black and brown people. What bothered and hurt me most was when this renewed support from white folks evaporated after the summer of 2020. But it wasn't just white people. It was queer people talking freedom, but still investing in gender policing and conformist notions of sexuality and relationships. It was other black folks talking about freedom with no anti-capitalist analysis. It was new abolitionists reducing abolitionist organizing to only defunding the police instead of engaging in the revolutionary work of dreaming up a new world. One grounded in freedom, love, and care, and just as much about abolishing the violence of policing in our interpersonal and community relationships as it is about abolishing the carceral systems that our world seems to depend on. It was people talking about liberation, but not showing interest in taking risks, choosing discomfort, and entering the subversive work of fugitivity. It was people wanting freedom while still desperately worshiping comfort and trying to look good. We don't need another hero. In observance of Pride that June, I ended up moderating a small online panel for the New York Public Library, during which we explored millennial engagement with various justice movements. It was during that panel that I started wondering what it meant to be good. There were, and still are, so many people who, inspired by the great changemakers that have come before, are working tirelessly now to free us all, are trying to do what is good and helpful. These same people have risked so much to teach and lead us out of the experience of suffering. In a sense, this book began introducing itself to me after the panel, as I reflected on the conversation and on everything that had been happening during the pandemic. So much has changed for me and everyone. By now, it's clear that there is no normal worth returning to. This loss of our old lives, coupled with facing the work of establishing a new normal, is painful for many of us. Each generation living now must dream up a new world beyond the violence and chaos we were born into. We must choose the end of delusion and embrace a vision that leads us into the messianic age of love. To get there, we must return to the truth of who we are, to journey back through the trauma and forgetfulness, to reconcile histories of violence, and to tend to our broken hearts. After the panel, I kept asking myself what we need to do this work. How do we excel beyond performative goodness and earn the experience of goodness? How do we let our hearts break and understand we can survive the breaking? How do we hold the complex experiences of being human? And how do we care for our humanness? What is freedom for us as individuals and for our communities? What does it mean to practice true abolition? And then, how can we look to the great people, the saints from various spiritual and religious paths, as well as the social change agents who have touched this world through profound acts of love and liberation, whom I love and have been changed and inspired by? I realized that if I loved the saints so much, and if I had committed to the path of becoming a spiritual leader concerned with justice, I had to say out loud, regardless of how it made me look, that this was as much a time of spiritual warfare as it was a time of political and social warfare, and that the struggle of the unseen world was at the root of the political and social struggle. Then, suddenly, in my head, Tina Turner began singing about how we didn't need another hero, and I agreed. Besides, no one can save us from ourselves. No one can take our suffering away and instantly endow us with goodness. Instead, we must become our own heroes. We must remember our sainthood. Not a sainthood of the past, but a sainthood that responds to the urgency of this period of crisis. This new sainthood must be based in courage, hope, vision, and an authentic desire for all beings and everything to be free. We must become new saints. The new saint is not a good person. So many of us are obsessed with being good because the performance and pursuit of goodness are tied to many cultural and religious ideas of being a person or human. If we are not good, we are not considered human. If we are not human, we are considered bad, flawed, or invalid, which means that we lose our humanity and become othered. In this otherness, we no longer receive the basic care that good people get. This logic fuels the prison industrial complex. When people break the law, they become bad and thus othered and punished without any regard to care because they no longer deserve it. Without care, bad people become the reciprocals of violence, masked as justice. Thus, we learn that being good is how we maintain our humanity and get the resources we need, especially love. But this politics of goodness is linked to one of the most violent expressions of care: conditional love. Many of us have traded actual goodness for a performance of goodness because we are trying to get the care we need to survive. If being good requires us to perform heteronormativity over our innate and authentic queerness, we do that. If it means pretending to agree with someone because they hold the resources we need, we do that too. For most of my life, goodness was something used to keep me in line. To be a good boy meant that I adhered to certain etiquettes that have been mostly informed by anti-Blackness, anti-queerness, ableism, class, and capitalism. Being good meant making other people happy through conforming to these etiquettes, which required my silence and complicity in the harm others were causing me. Systems of dominance have co-opted the work of goodness to keep people from disrupting systemic violence. In this case, goodness is understood to be an expression of virtue if it does not challenge the power imbalance and does not make the people who benefit the most from that power imbalance uncomfortable. When you are good, you are not causing trouble. Here, I define trouble as creating discomfort for others. I am no longer interested in being a good person. Performative goodness, conditional love, and shame are a violent trinity that has functioned to silence and repress countless beings, and which I believe belies so much of the violence we deal with each day. I have long known that conditional love and shame are effective weapons of interpersonal and cultural warfare, but we never think of the weaponization of goodness as violence used to harm people by suppressing and silencing them. I am not a good person. I can't be a good person because goodness is more than something we perform or something we are. It is not an identity location we settle into. Goodness is the choice I am making each moment to do what is conducive to freedom for me and others. Goodness is a verb that I am actively engaging with. I like to say I am gooding as opposed to I am being good. We practice goodness not because we want to be seen as good or because we want to experience happiness or even because it is what we are supposed to be doing. We choose goodness because it's how we get free while inviting others to join us. Voting, educating ourselves, highlighting the voices of the most underrepresented folks, being at least liberal, recycling, carrying people's groceries, reading the current justice books, never saying Candyman in the mirror, putting up Black Lives Matter signs, saying please and thank you, paying taxes, not wearing white shoes after Labor Day, supporting charities, avoiding cracks and walking under ladders, and offering thoughts and prayers are all wonderful things to do, but they are more about feeling good about ourselves and making sure others view us favorably. Which one of these beloved labors will actually get us free? In the past few years, we have been obsessed with voting. According to popular liberal opinion, if you don't vote Democrat, you are a bad person who doesn't give a shit about the rights of others. But there are just as many racists, capitalists, ableists, rapists, and misogynists voting Democrat as there are voting Republican. And voting is no longer going to save us and set us free. I do not consent to anyone voting for me to be free. Voting never freed my ancestors. Our labor, love, magic, and acting up offered us whatever freedoms we have today. And it is these same tools we and all oppressed communities will continue to rely on. There are two expressions of goodness: relative and absolute. Relative goodness is how I choose goodness in order to be happy, suffer less, and help others suffer less. Absolute goodness is choosing goodness because we want to get free and help others do the same. For goodness to be sustainable in our lives, we must turn our practice toward the absolute and train in goodness that lights the path into real freedom while showing others how to do this as well. Practicing goodness also means that I must experience the grief of what it means to align myself with freedom and away from chaos and drama. We must recognize that we have built our lives and identities on the experience of conflict and distraction, which makes sense because although we may talk a good game about freedom, we still use drama in order to distract ourselves from the real work of getting free, which is the work of figuring out who we are through the rage and brokenheartedness. With drama and silliness, we have no idea who we are. Some of us get into goodness because we want people to like us, while others choose goodness to avoid the shit in our lives by using the pleasure we get from good experiences to cover up the pain of unpleasant ones. These motivations for choosing goodness will lead to more suffering because we are not choosing to be with the truth of who we are. Freedom is only discovered through truth, not through comfortable stories that make us feel good. To choose goodness does not mean we are performing, documenting, or broadcasting goodness. Goodness isn't a show for others to influence how they think about us. Seeking the approval of others will always enable those others to dictate our freedom. But it may be the case that folks around us don't want to be free, and the choices we make may trigger them. Freedom doesn't require validation. It is a personal choice we must make on our own, even when others around us do not consent. To choose goodness is to choose freedom, first for ourselves and then for our communities. Goodness also means that I acknowledge the duality of light and dark, which is the practice of acknowledging balance. Balance is one of the laws of the relative world, experiencing itself as the idea that there cannot be this without that. There is no light without dark, no up without down, or maybe no understanding of liberation without the discomfort of incarceration. To choose goodness, we must also know what it has meant to choose the dark. Some of the most influential change leaders and healers have been people who once chose what wasn't conducive to freedom. John Fire Lame Deer believed that in order to really help others as a medicine man, he had to know his trauma, get lost in it, and eventually emerge from it so he could understand how to help others move through their trauma. Or I think about Malcolm X, who, after years of struggling to figure out who he was beyond the pain and confusion, came to understand freedom while he was physically incarcerated by the state. But choosing goodness in this context doesn't mean I stand in opposition to darkness. It means that I recognize that darkness is asking to be held in care and awareness. If I can hold darkness like this, then it becomes a teacher. When I can't hold it, then it holds me. And this is the beginning of evil. When we realize that goodness is a choice we are making to be free, and that choice becomes a habitual process, we start experiencing the state of virtue. I am practicing virtue when everything in my life is grounded in the pursuit of freedom. I am not trying to be a virtuous person. I am trying to choose what is conducive to freedom. And that continuous choice slowly begins to orient my life toward freedom. The Old Saints. New Saint is a contemporary expression of an ancient Buddhist tradition that understands the saint as a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is roughly translated as spiritual warrior, and is one who is motivated by the energy of bodhicitta, or a profound altruistic wish to free all beings from suffering. I feel that the world is desperate for a reframing of this tradition that is contemporary, direct, simple, and accessible to all folks, especially those who do not identify as Buddhists. Saints are people from various spiritual and religious traditions who have deeply embodied love and compassion, and whose embodiment has inspired countless others to aspire to that same practice. However, for most of us, sainthood seems a lofty and vague endeavor that is more divine and religious than practical. This current era is calling for saints, new saints, who are from this time and place, who speak the language of this time and place, and most importantly, who embrace the integration of both social and ultimate liberation. New saints can surrender into the divine or spiritual while disrupting systems of violence. I believe that we all can and must become new saints for ourselves and our communities. The first saint I knew was Jesus, who walked on water, turned water into wine, healed people, and raised folks from the dead. And then there was Moses, who led his people out of Egypt by dividing the Dead Sea. And the Buddha, who cut out a path of liberation by realizing the dreamlike nature of reality. Later, I found myself laughing with Mary Magdalene, who I call Mary Mags, and Milarepa, the great Tibetan saint and yogi of one of my root lineages, who obtained a staggering kind of enlightenment after struggling with an adolescent trauma and a few very bad decisions. There was also Mache Labdran, a female Tibetan master who offered the profound practice of Cha, and her guru, Padampa Sangye, the Black Indian master to whom I have felt very close since one of my teachers confided how I reminded him of Sange. Then there were saints like St. John of the Cross, who wrote The Dark Night of the Soul, a poem that has shaped my relationship to the loneliness of spiritual awakening. And there was St. Teresa of Avila, whose passion for life gave way to a deep devotion to the divine, and whom I still dance and sing with as she teaches me how to listen more deeply to the divine in pleasure. Later in my life, there were teachers whom I considered saints as well. And there were the great social change saints like W.E.B. Du Bois, Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Harriet Tubman, and Toussaint Louverture, all of whom, early in my life, led me to focus my labor on freedom. Later in my teens came Audre Lorde and the Black Panthers, and moving into my young adult years, there was Essex Hemphill, James Baldwin, Dorothy Day, Marsha P. Johnson, Emma Goldman, Bell Hooks, Samuel Delaney, and others. These writers, thinkers, and activists helped me to understand the responsibility we have to help others experience freedom and safety, and how to be Black and proud. To understand that the purpose of being Black is not to be consumed by trauma from perpetual anti-Black racism, but to choose joy and care for myself and my community, and to allow that joy to reflect back to our oppressors their own deep insecurities and traumas, so they can see and tend to them instead of weaponizing them against us. Who are your saints or teachers? How have they inspired you? Do you really believe that you can do the same work they did? Can you listen to God or the divine or your mind and spirit to do the work they did? The new saint. First, the work of the new saint is grounded in radical Dharma, teachings that emphasize that there is no ultimate liberation without a commitment to social liberation. To bypass the struggle of people surviving systems of violence in favor of an aesthetic life is itself an act of violence. The new saint is a being in the world and in a body with identities. Liberation is allowing the confusion of our relative experience to point us into the clarity of ultimate experience, while guiding others who suffer into that same realization without bypassing anything. Second, the new saint understands that this is a time of spiritual warfare, and that spiritual warfare is a cosmic struggle between light and dark, or the struggle between liberation and delusion. The activities of the new saint may look secular, but the work is driven by spiritual commitment to liberate beings so that they might return to the experience of the essence, which is the most liberated nature of all phenomena, exhausting the illusion of dualities like light and dark, or even comfort and discomfort. There is no secular path to ultimate liberation. And without belief in the essence, we find ourselves circling deeper into the suffering and darkness instead of being propelled out of it. Third, as a spiritual project, the new saint works between and are in collaboration with the unseen world. The new saint allies with their ancestors, deities, and other benevolent beings to further the work of liberation while strategizing against harmful forces. The new saint is a spiritual warrior who learns to hold the complexities of multiple realms and realities, and who leverages this work to benefit others. Fourth, the new saint embraces, rather than bypasses, the complexity of identity. The new saint uses their identities as a way for other beings to connect with them and as a way to build trust and liberation work. Identity becomes an expression of the sacred. The new saint experiences the space and fluidity of identity, They know that they are more than their identities while also embracing the realness of identities in the present moment. Fifth, the new saint, being situated in identities, speaks in the language of the times, the language that is accessible to people. There is no one way to communicate with beings. Beings are countless and diverse, and new saints must speak the language of the people they are trying to free. It is hard to help people who can't relate to you or understand what you're trying to communicate. Sixth, the new saint is not afraid of taking risks, knowing that real liberation only happens through the discomfort of change, and not through the comfort of staying safe. Discomfort forces us to grow, to think differently, to develop a deeper sense of who we are and what we need. If you are afraid of making mistakes, then liberation work will be impossible. Seventh, the new saint is not fearless. On the contrary, the new saint is full of fear. Fear is important because it is a sign that we are taking risks in the work. Over time, the new saint can develop a spiritual confidence that helps them enter liberation work with faith that they have what they need to accomplish their goals. However, the new saint learns to not react to fear and to instead choose courageousness, allowing clarity, love, joy, and compassion to guide liberation work. Eighth, the new saint will not free everyone, but they will, if they are authentic, inspire others to do the work of liberation. The New Saints tradition is like a liberatory pyramid scheme where everyone wins. The New Saint may inspire a handful of people to do liberation work, and that handful may each inspire their own handful of people to do the work, and on and on. In the same way, the Buddha emerged, embodying the work of liberation and therefore inspiring, to this day, countless beings to continue the work while everyone continues to be benefited and cared for. Ninth, the new saint is a prophet, which means that the new saint reveals what is happening right now. Prophecy in this tradition is not about the future. It is about telling the truth of what is happening now in our relationships, collectives, and in the world in general. Telling and revealing the truth is perhaps one of the hardest roles for anyone, because most of us don't want to hear the truth and can be especially antagonistic toward truth tellers, as their work creates a lot of discomfort. However, there can be no liberation without the truth. Matter of fact, liberation is only the truth. 10th, the work of the new saint is sacred. Sacredness is both the realization and the embodiment of the essence of all phenomena. In a tantric worldview, all of the phenomenal world is sacred because everything is already liberated, as the nature of all phenomena is the union of emptiness, space, and energy potential. The new saint's work of liberation is realizing the essence of everything and helping all beings experience that essence for themselves. This view of sacredness isn't about what is right or wrong, but whatever helps us to experience liberation and realize the essence. The magic of the new saint. In traditional Buddhist mythology, the Bodhisattva, or the Buddhist saint, can sound like a superhero, as if they are Wonder Woman, the Black Panther, Sailor Moon, or even Steven Universe and the Crystal Gems. I believe that our modern understanding of superheroes is very much in line with the spirit of the Buddhist saint. However, the notion of superpowers is distracting because the ultimate spiritual weapon of the Buddhist saint is not supernatural ability. Rather, the real superpower of the Buddhist saint is giving a shit. And giving a shit is an expression of their bodhicitta, or their deep desire to help free people from suffering. I am not saying that some, or perhaps many, of the great spiritual saints of the past did not possess abilities or gifts that could be considered extraordinary, otherworldly, or beyond the bounds of ordinary human capacity. Yet, it wasn't their extraordinary powers that made them special. It was their dedication to helping people that made them extraordinary. Even though a new saint can develop magical abilities, such as healing, clairvoyance, other psychic skills, or even flying, the real magic of the new saint is in the welding of two practices. The first practice is the expression of what I call awakened care, an expression of love and compassion for both themselves and others, an expression of joy, all grounded in clarity. The most profound care we and others can experience is to be free from suffering and all the causes and conditions of suffering. The second practice is the development of the capacity to disrupt habitual reactivity to everything that arises for us by choosing to experience what arises for us, which helps us transition into a place of responsiveness. Experiencing and then choosing how to respond with care is an expression of liberation. The new saint can choose the most beneficial way to respond to anything. Together, these two practices offer the new saint the most profound way to reduce harm and violence while cultivating transformative care with the goal of helping all beings get free. Moreover, this magic makes it possible for the new saint to do four primary activities: give a shit about everyone's liberation, figure out their work, what they are supposed to do that work, and return to that work again and again. The new saint as ordinary. Because we love and venerate the saints, because we pray to them for blessings, developing deep devotion to their embodiment of the divine, because we tend to elevate them to a place of godhood, it is easy to believe that they didn't start out just like us, ordinary, struggling, and basically human. Many of us believe that we can never experience the divine like the saints, and so we stop trying. There's a popular saying in the circles in which I travel that goes, "Try Jesus, don't try me." Translation: don't fuck with me, because I will fuck with you right back. Take it to Jesus, someone who will love and forgive, maybe turn the other cheek, because I am only going to return violence. Though I laugh when people say this, there is some real truth behind how we elevate saints and believe that they have this natural capacity to practice peace and patience while we don't. So we give up and pass the work on to the saints. I believe so much of the violence that seems to come out of Christian communities is based in this separation between Jesus and his followers. This separation has become so wide that it's become infected with a disbelief that Jesus cannot be touched or his practice embodied. This disbelief feeds both our grief of never being able to be like Jesus and the rigid, ever present weight of original sin. The tension from all this is experienced as shame manifesting as self hate. When self hate goes uncared for, it is weaponized and projected onto others, especially those who don't seem to suffer from the shame of not being good enough to embody Jesus. The new saint must remain ordinary and human, grounded in a strong relatability that radiates the sense that they are doing something that any person can learn to do. If the new saint doesn't do this, then it becomes difficult for others to believe that they can embody the same expression if they train and commit to the path of liberation. The four yogas of the new saint. The new saint's path expresses itself in four categories that I call the four yogas of the new saint. I've been training in and practicing various forms of yoga for over 20 years now. And what is important to understand is that yoga is more than the physical postures, called asanas, or an exercise. It's a complex system of study and practice designed to help the practitioner or yogi experience liberation through the dissolution of duality. The word yoga itself means union or to yoke, referring to the union of body and mind, but conveying more generally the work of uniting what seems separate and disparate into an experience of wholeness. Once wholeness is achieved, the experience of oneness dawns. Nothing can be freed in fragments, especially beings. These four yogas of the new saint are areas of practice that guide the work of liberation for the new saint and the communities they are working with, but they must be practiced together for liberation to happen. The yogas are dream, clarity, work, and care. The yoga of dream. When we talk about freedom, we are also talking about freeing our minds. This is the primary focus of Buddhism. All phenomena are energy. Our minds are intelligent energy, which is to say, energy that has the capacity to be aware. Because of this intelligent energy, our minds have capacity to shape themselves and other energies. Our minds have gotten distracted by the phenomena they have created, like thoughts and emotions, and we find ourselves shaped and fixed into this reality, which seems real and rigid. Freedom is remembering that everything fixed and solid is only so in our minds, and that we can free ourselves at any time, if we remember. The movement of freedom is more than just becoming free. It is also remembering the state of oneness and piercing the illusion of ego or self existing, which historically functions to keep us distracted. Oneness is returning back to the nature of the mind, which, in the New Saint's path, can be equated with returning back to the experience of God as the Mother or Father, or returning back to the experience of energy itself. The yoga of dream for the new saint is the realization that this reality that we live and struggle through is not our true home. It is a dream, an illusion, or even a figment of our imaginations. It is the matrix, and like the groundbreaking film of the same name, we are wandering through an experience of delusion, trying to break out of it into the real world. However, unlike the film, we are not trying to break out of this matrix into an even harsher reality. We are breaking out into freedom. Our current reality is an experience that we are trying to understand in order to figure out what freedom really is. It is important to understand that the new saint is trying to free everything, even things considered unconscious. To free unconscious phenomena, such as unconscious biases or narratives that are not true, means disrupting our perception of what things are so that our experience of phenomenal reality becomes transparent, fluid, and basically less real. This is how we experience freedom from the realness of things. When things are less real, we begin to feel more spacious and, therefore, freer. The path of the new saint is a path of freedom, not of comfort or of happiness. Freedom is transcending the experience of comfort and happiness to a state where there is no such thing as comfort or happiness. Freedom is simply being in a state beyond the dualism of happiness or sadness and comfort or discomfort. The yoga of clarity. Dharma is a Buddhist word that is often translated as teaching or wisdom. I tend to think of it more as wisdom or as the truth of how things actually are. All Buddhist teaching should lead us back to the fundamental wisdom that all things and phenomena are expressions of emptiness itself. There is no fundamental existence, no there, as Gertrude Stein once declared. Dharma is wisdom, and wisdom is an articulation of oneness, beyond the illusion of phenomenal reality. It is the experience of the mind itself, which is the experience of conscious, unbound energy permeating everything. In the New Saint's path, I call wisdom clarity, and it is this clarity that makes the magic of the New Saint possible. Clarity is the ocean or wide open fertile earth from which liberation is possible. We are already free. We just need to remember, through the training of getting clear. This is the basic truth of the Buddhist path, as well as the New Saint's path. Ethics arise out of our training and clarity. The ethics of liberation include more than just an understanding of what is right and wrong. This binary expression of ethics is too rigid and lacks the potential for creativity. It creates the conditions for universal prescriptions of what is right and wrong and leads people to dominate others with their view of what's right, which is seen in systems like imperialism and colonialism. What is right for one person may not be considered right for another. Instead, the New Saint chooses what is conducive to achieving the dream of liberation for themselves. For instance, I personally do not need to set boundaries around recreational drugs and alcohol. I consume these in moderation, and the consumption doesn't disrupt my liberation work. However, many people do have to refrain from substance use, as it does create obstacles to their liberation and overall wellness. What is okay for me may not be okay for others. That's fine. In this particular ethic, we all can figure out what is conducive to our liberation. The yoga of work. The yoga of work is the training the new saint undergoes to free themselves and others. It is the essential labor that Carrie Seeline spoke of. It is loving in a way that is generous and spacious, not controlling or rigid. Further, it is figuring out the nuances of the work of liberation, knowing that each saint's liberation work will look different because we all are starting out in different places. The path of liberation asks us to surrender to our work and to internalize the discipline of liberation work so it becomes as natural as breathing or thinking. To become the work is to become the embodiment of freedom and a source of inspiration for others. Because the new saint is also training and getting clear about why we suffer, they will understand that all beings are trapped in experiences of suffering they can be freed from with help. The new saint understands that beings will never be truly safe, well, and resourced until they are completely free from suffering. This intention begins to awaken the wish for everyone to be free. The more the new saint yearns for freedom, the more they are compelled to work for freedom for all. This deep compassion evolves into awakened care when they realize, through the deepening of clarity, that the essence of everything is already free. From this realization, they develop a fierce love for beings and a wish for them to be happy and free. The union of compassion with clarity and love evolves into awakened care. Basically, the new saint gives a shit about how they and others are suffering and vows to disrupt the causes and conditions of that suffering. Awakened care guides the vision or dream of the new saint. The dream of everything being liberated from delusion is the labor of remembering that everyone and everything is already free. The new saint works to first liberate themselves from their own delusion through developing awakened concern and then to inspire others to do the same work. All phenomenal reality is liberated when we realize the nature of everything is an expression of a fundamental, boundless spaciousness and emptiness imbued with energy. The yoga of care. Without care, there can be no work. Getting free is like preparing for a long road trip through the country of our delusions. We must pack our provisions, service the vehicle we are traveling in, plan the route, and reflect on who can help us in our travels. When the journey is overwhelming or exhausting, how do we rest? We will never get free or have the capacity to free others if we are not well enough ourselves. I have seen so many people who are drowning in trauma and despair, but are trying, nevertheless, to help others out from that experience of being overwhelmed. What always ends up happening is that they pull themselves deeper into the experience of being overwhelmed, or otherwise become more work for the people they were trying to help, who realize that they must figure out a way to support the person they thought was coming to help them. How can we save others from drowning if we can't swim? The path of the new saint is about training to experience freedom for ourselves, and then using our experience as a source of expertise, which in turn supports others in their work to get free. In all this labor, we engage and care to fuel the work. Self-care is a buzzword that carries a lot of self-indulgent, classist baggage. But in the context of the new saint, self-care is how I figure out how to sustain my individual liberation work in order to support collective liberation work. Self-care is also collective care, because the more I can understand how to care for myself, the more I can offer to the collective while also opening to the care the collective is offering me in return. In the spirit of Mother Fannie Lou Hamer, the great organizer and freedom fighter, at some point we have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. We need to get fed up with the nonsense, chaos, and the intricate folds of suffering to generate the fundamental revolutionary aspiration of the new saint, which is to finally get the hell out of here. But when this aspiration arises, we don't just go anywhere. We start divesting our energy of dramas that perpetually trap and drain us, and start reinvesting in awakening ethical care and clarity. We not only start caring about others, we start caring about ourselves and what we need to get free. When we start caring about ourselves, we can finally establish the boundaries that make it easier for us to start really caring for others and what they need to get free. The new saint's levels of change. The work of the new saint happens on multiple levels of change that must be engaged with for liberation to happen. These levels include the outer, inner, secret, and super secret. They are also expressed as commitments because until all four levels of change are engaged, no liberation is possible. The outer level of change is the recognition of the phenomenal world and the basic reality of suffering and delusion, which I call the carceral state. When the new saint works on this level, they make a commitment to the liberation of all beings from systems of harm. The outer level of change is the dream of people being free from violent domination, having access to the resources they need to be well, and experiencing a basic level of happiness. The inner level of change is the recognition of the inner experience of mind and body. It is an understanding that real change doesn't happen until our minds change, becoming clearer and more spacious, which shifts the experience of our bodies. The inner level of change is what fuels and inspires the work of the new saint to help liberate others. The secret level of change is the acknowledgement of the unseen world, the world of spirits, deities, personified energies, and other configurations of different dimensions and energetic planes. When the new saint allies with the unseen world, they open themselves up to working in solidarity with unseen beings who also want us to be free. The new saint is in solidarity with the unseen beings, helping them to get free as well. The super secret level of change is understanding that the nature of all phenomena, both seen and unseen, is an expression of emptiness within boundless space imbued with energetic potential. This level is the heart of the new saint's personal experience of liberation, and it is this very subtle level that must be embodied for liberation to evolve beyond a dream and into a lived experience. The Seven Sorrows of the New Saint. When I first started studying Bodhisattva literature as an early practitioner, I was deeply moved by the Bodhisattva vow not to leave any being behind, and how they commit to ushering all beings through the door of enlightenment before they themselves enter. At the same time, the tradition explained that beings were numberless, and that as long as one being was not free, there would be a carceral state, even if it existed for one being only. Even the Buddha is said to have entered nirvana, returning to the great consciousness or essence, without having freed all beings. The sorrow of the new saint is the experience of realizing that the work of self and collective liberation is driven by uncomfortable, confusing contradictions that we must embody. The new saint metabolizes the grief of dealing with these contradictions and realizes that liberation is complex. These contradictions must be tended to by mourning them and offering the discomfort space while experiencing and releasing the sadness. This grief is what I call the sorrow of the new saint. There are 7 great sorrows of the new saint. 1. We will leave people behind. 2. Much of our labor will go unseen. 3. We will be misunderstood. 4. We will have to figure out what we need. 5. We will disappoint people. 6. We will always embody the potential for violence. And 7. We will make mistakes. These are the contradictions that we must tend to in order to do the work of navigating the illogic of liberation and actually getting ourselves and others free. We will leave people behind. We will not get everyone free because not all of us are ready to get free. When someone isn't ready to be free, forcing them to do the labor of awakening becomes an act of violence. We can neither drag people to freedom nor scare them, manipulate them, intimidate them, or use one of our favorite collective techniques, yell at them on social media, to get them to freedom. We are not Mother Harriet, using our rifle to keep people in check as we journey to freedom. Training in awakened care is training in love, compassion, and joy, which helps us to get clear about what it takes to get people free. We can't do work for others. Each of us must choose liberation on our own terms, and in doing so, commit to our individual labor. Much of our labor will go unseen. When we think of the spiritual saint, we tend to think of people who are super famous, who sparked and led massive freedom movements that helped millions of people get access to resources they needed. People like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, or Dr. King. However, an overwhelming majority of people who are committed to this labor will not be known or celebrated. These beings figured out what their work was, work that may look very different from the work we are called to do. I say much of our labor will go unseen because often people around us may not consider our labor important or even labor at all. For example, one powerful expression of labor is prayer. Prayer is imperative in liberation work, but it is not so public or tangible. But we are being helped by countless beings at this very moment, and we may never be able to understand their labor just as we are helping others around us without them understanding. I do not expect applause or a parade. My only expectation is to do the work of liberation for myself and others. We will be misunderstood. When we choose to get free and vow to help others to get free, we are embracing a life that sets us apart from most beings. To choose freedom is to choose clarity, love, compassion, and joy. Their manifestation as awakened care will influence us to make decisions that other people who have not made the same vows will not understand. When I made the decision to enter a long retreat in order to embody my commitment to this path, I was misunderstood by a lot of people in my life, especially close friends and family. My activist friends accused me of running away from the real work of freedom. One family member accused me of being selfish. Another told me I was joining a cult. Someone even accused me of having a mental illness. Most people felt like I was making an extreme decision that made no sense. None of this bothered me because I was sure that this was what I needed to do to get free, and it was. People who are not trying to get free will not understand what the work looks like and will try to disrupt that work because they will think you are making a mistake. Your work may remind them of the work they are not doing, and that may be painful for them. They may attempt to sabotage you. As my elders say, keep your mind stayed on freedom and trust your choices and instincts. We will have to figure out what we need. The Bodhisattva tradition promotes selflessness as a virtue, which is often misunderstood to mean that what we need is not important. What we need is vital. If we don't get our needs met, not only will it be difficult to meet the needs of others, but we may also start manipulating those we have committed to help to get our unmet needs fulfilled in ways that are harmful and unethical. On the New Saint's path, we must figure out what we need and acknowledge that our unmet needs create distractions for us and impact the work of liberation for others. This is one of the most challenging aspects of the New Saint's work. We must love ourselves enough to care for ourselves, and in doing so, reduce the labor we force others to do for us. We will disappoint people. I often say that if I have not disappointed anyone in this work, something is wrong. When we commit to the path of liberation as an expression of care, people start expecting a lot from us. They will be disappointed when you maintain boundaries in order to make sure you have the space to be well. People, including dead folks, will want you to always be accessible because you may very well be one of the only resources of authentic care they have. The 8th century Indian philosopher and scholar Shantideva wrote in A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, one of the most important Bodhisattva tradition texts, that we should become both the doctor and the medicine for beings. This doesn't mean that our physical bodies and energy are always accessible, but that through prayer we can send positive energy to other beings. There are a lot of people, both living and dead, who reach out to me. And while I can't show up for everyone, I can pray and ask other beings who may be better resources than I am to help those I can't get to. We will always embody the potential for violence. The new saint is committed to the reduction of violence. It is not possible to completely disrupt the harm that we can create for beings. Even the Buddha was said to have stepped on a few insects in his lifetime. If we love someone, we will always have the potential to express violence. For example, If you are a parent and someone comes along and tries to hurt your child, you will probably not just let your child be hurt without protecting them and fighting off the aggressor. We must consider how some forms of violence can sometimes only be disrupted by other forms of violence. Sometimes I've had to raise my voice and cuss people out because that is the only thing that can reduce the harm that I or others around me are experiencing from an aggressor. There have been times that I have had to physically protect myself from the harm of others because I care for my well being as much as other people's well being. The new saint chooses violence only because they care for themselves and others, and know that to protect people, including aggressors, we sometimes have to meet violence with violence. In other words, the new saint can choose violence out of deep care for everyone, including an aggressor, while being clear that violence isn't meant as retaliation. It's meant to reduce harm. We will make mistakes. We can't be afraid to make mistakes. We will inevitably make a lot of them. As one of my teachers, Kempo Solchum Jamso, once taught, making mistake after mistake, I walk the unmistaken path. This is not a path of perfection. It is a path of learning how to reduce harm and deepen care as a means of getting free. We learn from the mistakes we make. We have to understand that the carceral state is in perpetual chaos, and it takes tremendous effort to navigate this chaos. As we do so, we may not be fully aware of everything that's happening. We can only make choices with the information we have at the moment. Our meditation practice is important because it gradually deepens our awareness and clarity. Clarity arises out of learning from mistakes as well as not being afraid to make them. Holding the discomfort of mistakes can teach us deeper awareness and empathy on the path toward liberation.